speculation and guessing games surrounding the starting quarterback competition for Tennessee football is still very much the reality, even following the second scrimmage of fall camp. But Josh Heupel, he did meet with media following that scrimmage, and this is everything we know about that quarterback competition. I'm Paige Dower. This is the Sports Page on Full Disclosure. I try to be a bit more specific in my questioning with Josh Heupel, as he does have a good way of maybe skirting around answers that he doesn't want to answer. So right away I asked him if he could use the eyeball test. How does Joey Aguilar look, right? Because in the past he'll tell you that he hasn't had a chance to look at film, and he has the best media training probably of all the coaches here at Tennessee. So if he doesn't want to give you an answer, he's not going to give you an answer. And it's very much how the Michigan Wolverines are handling their quarterback competition. You know, their head coach said that they're going to wait to the game week on Monday to reveal who their starting quarterback is. I believe that's probably a model Tennessee and Josh Heupel will certainly follow when it goes to their starting quarterback competition. But when I asked him, you know, the eyeball test on Joey Aguilar, how he's looked in the second scrimmage, how he's looked in fall camp, we got some, you know, good characteristics and adjectives and, you know, verbs to describe how Joey Aguilar looks. And it's that he's consistent, he's accurate, he's, you know, he's growing, he looks comfortable in the system. And those are the qualities you want out of a potential starting quarterback. But when you get to how he looked in the second scrimmage today, this is what Heupel had to say.
He's handled himself extremely well during our night walkthroughs, which is, you know, mental focus, mental sweat, and because of that, he's, you know, extremely comfortable in what we're doing right now.
But the real question is, who's leading the charge? Who's separating themselves? Who looks most consistent? We're not going to get a flat-out answer, but if we can go back to what Joey Halzle told us a couple of weeks ago, when it does come to that quarterback competition, they're not going to be in a rush to name a starter, and they're going to leave it to the players to kind of force their hand to become the starter. That's maybe where you get this sense with George McIntyre, right? Like, he's just not going away. He's really competing at a very high level, and he's giving the other quarterbacks a run for their money. I'm just not convinced quite yet that a freshman at his size will probably start for this team when there's so many question marks around the team. I just don't think it's the type of season that you would want to be your debut season when there's so many question marks, especially on offense. But when we look to what Halzle said, a quarterback has to go and they have to take it. You have to grab the bull by the horns and you have to force their hand. So I asked Heupel, I'm not asking you to name any names, but who is separating themselves, or how are they separating themselves? Are you seeing somebody get ready to take the bull by the horns? And I probably got a very cloudy answer. Again, it was just how they've all handled themselves very well in the competition. They're pushing themselves, and we really didn't get much more clarity on who's leading the charge and if you're seeing the separation you want to see.
Like what all those guys have done, first they've competed in a positive way with each other in the meeting room. That's certainly been the case out on the practice field. I think this football team believes in that group of guys too. You know, who they are, how they lead, and how they compete every single day.
But the main thing that we did here, and if we could go back to my show on Wednesday when I'm like, we have to read between the lines. What does that blue curtain really mean? We heard that the defense and the offense, they did trade a little bit on who had the better of who, and maybe the defense had a little bit of a slower start. But what we heard in regards to the quarterback competition is how they were consistent and they were accurate with the football. So I'm not sure if we'll hear from sources later who are saying that, you know, Joey had another pick six or something was going on with Jake Merklinger. Maybe there might be an interception or two that happens, and I guess depending on who was out on the field, you might hope that there was an interception, but it's not going to come from Jermon McCoy. He wasn't out on the field, but I wouldn't be too concerned with that reality, because you could treat this like the preseason in the NFL. Most of the time, those stars, when you go to those position players, those skill players, they're not necessarily at all ever in the preseason, i.e. like Justin Jefferson. So Jermon McCoy not being out there, I'm not concerned with. I really think a timetable for him, ideally, you'd want him back for the Georgia game if I had to pretend to be a doctor. But when you go to that wide receiver room, and we've talked about maybe some of those concerns before, you know, Chris Brazzell's continuing to make his way back. I couldn't gather how involved he was in practice or in the scrimmage, if any. It was probably incredibly limited. Mike Matthews is making plays down the field, so we talked about his versatility in all three phases or all three positions in that wide receiver room. So he's certainly getting the reps that you need. Didn't hear anything about Braylon Staley from what I can remember, but when we look at the young players and what Tennessee will need out of those young players, you could look to that wide receiver room specifically, where Darius Jackson, Travis Smith Jr., who Mike Matthews described as like man-child, right? Like, they're just so big, they're so physical, and they've grown so much in their short amount of time here. And it might be because of circumstances why Staley and Matthews didn't play last season, and it might be because of circumstances that those two freshmen even play this season because Tennessee just doesn't have the bodies and that wide receiver room to avoid playing young players. So we could see some early reps from those guys, especially when you consider everything that we've heard from the team. And again, just still trying to figure out, who's taking over on the offensive and the defensive line and how they've all been able to compete. But of course, the main topic is that quarterback room. And what we've heard is they're continuing to handle themselves in a really meaningful way, and they're competing in a really meaningful way. We're just not going to get much clarity probably right until that Monday leading into the Syracuse game. So until then, we'll see what the sources say. But if we're not getting a clear answer from the man himself and Josh Heupel. But all in all, it seems like another, positive day 2 scrimmage, or scrimmage number 2 for Tennessee football, and we'll see what else comes out of camp with the press conferences that'll happen next week when they have their mock game week leading into the actual game week. So make sure you subscribe, turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on anything coming up over the next couple of weeks and then into the football season. Can you believe it's already almost here? I'll talk to you guys later this week.